Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining today's DreamWakers Daily Conversation. Today we're talking with Dr. Lindsay Chervinsky. Dr. Chervinsky is a historian of early America, the presidency and the government, especially the president's cabinet. She shares her research by writing everything from op-eds to books, speaking on podcasts and other media, and teaching every kind of audience. Her most recent book, The Cabinet, George Washington and the Creation of an American Institution, was just published, and she's also the creator of History Summit, a virtual book festival. In her spare time, you can find her reading, baking, or hiking with her dog, John Quincy Dog Adams, or just Quincy for short. On special occasions, she dresses him up and takes pictures of him at historic homes, which very excited about seeing this. Dr. Chervinsky, thank you so much for being with us today and talking with our students.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, like I just mentioned, you have a dog, and I feel like that's the place we all need to start because who doesn't love a good pup, you know? So
I agree.
About John Quincy Dog Adams, how he got his name, and a little bit about what you like to do for fun.
Absolutely. So I always have loved naming pets after sort of silly historical figures, and with this dog, it was no exception. I did my honors thesis in college on John Quincy Adams and just became so fascinated by his sort of very surly personality, but he also had incredible wit and humor and intelligence. And so I was like, that's a really good name. And then we rescued this dog, and it just seemed like it really fit. He is also so full of personality. And so John Quincy Dog Adams was born, and as you can see here with this picture, sometimes he lets me take him to places and dress him up accordingly. This particular picture actually was taken at like 6 a.m. on January 1st because I figured that was the time that there would be the fewest number of people in front of the Lincoln Monument. So yeah, he's a ton of fun. He's the best part of every day. And I can't imagine, especially right now, not having a dog.
That's incredible. I've been hearing that the shelters are all out of pets because people have been adopting so many animals. So that's really cute.
Yeah, it makes me so happy.
Yeah, I love that. So on a more serious note, shifting away from just the pup who's very cute, what does a day in the life look like? So what does like a day or a week as Dr. Chervinsky look like?
Well, one of the things that I like best about my work is that no day is really the same as the one before it. So the vast majority of my time is spent researching and writing, but I do that, as you said, I do that in a lot of different mediums, and writing an op-ed is very different than working on a book. And so it's fun to sort of switch that up. I also do a lot of media, so talking to podcast hosts or newspaper writers or journalists or people on the radio. And that's really fun because it's great to hear what sort of questions people have, what they're curious about. And it's a whole new audience to speak to, which I think is really the point of public history, is sharing all of this information with as broad of an audience as possible. And then there are some other, different activities that I sometimes do depending on what the day brings, whether it's a tour of the Decatur House where our offices are located, sometimes a White House tour, engaging with student groups. So it definitely keeps me on my toes because even if I have a calendar, the likelihood that it stays sort of the same by the end of the day as what I anticipated in the morning is pretty fun.
How has your day-to-day shifted now that we're all working from home and everything is virtual? Has that been a good thing?
Yes, that has changed things a lot. So I am very fortunate that I actually feel like I'm more busy now than I was before. I'm obviously not going anywhere, so I'm not doing White House tours, I'm not doing Decatur House tours, but I've been doing a lot of virtual events, both sort of online with my own work, but with other organizations and other sites to sort of share with their audiences what we've been up to. The Historical Association has been putting on a lot of content, so we've been really busy with that and shifting our gears to a more virtual perspective. I would say the biggest difference is that I am definitely writing more because there's just less to and fro, so there's more time. And of course, I get to do it all with pajama pants on because even if I put on, my nice work clothes up top for a video, I still can keep my slippers on below.
Absolutely. I think we're all becoming
Exactly. Why wear real shoes if you don't have to?
Exactly. Awesome. Well, was there, thinking back sort of on your life and career, was there a specific point in which you realized your passion was history and that's what you wanted to pursue?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always loved it, and I was a voracious reader when I grew up. I just could not get enough, especially of historical fiction. It was not unusual for me on the weekends to like start a book in the morning and not move until I finished it. So I always knew that I had this passion and that I loved it and I was good at it. But I really thought I was going to be a lawyer. I come from a family of lawyers. I thought that's what I wanted to do. That was my path until my senior year in college. I had actually taken the LSATs. And then there were a number of red flags about why that was a really bad idea, but I was sticking to the plan and I was being very stubborn and sort of ignoring those signs. And it wasn't until I was trying to answer an essay question for a law school application that I simply could not answer, that I was like, well, maybe this is a problem. And maybe it's time to reevaluate. And what I realized that I liked so much about the idea of going to law school was that I wanted to teach and I wanted to be a law professor. And then I realized I don't actually need to go to law school to do that. I can go the history route, which was always sort of where my passion. I enjoyed those classes the best anyway, which again, red flag, like, you should probably do what you love. Um, and so I took a year off. I worked for a nonprofit education organization and applied to get 2 history programs to get my PhD in history.
Amazing. Did you find in that time that you had people around you who were supportive? Was that like a really traumatic transition? Like, what did that change look like? Because I think it can be hard to change gears.
Um, well, a lot of people who had known me for a really long time were very shocked because I am a planner. I do like to stick to, what I plan to do. And I think my dad, especially, who was a lawyer, had a little bit of trouble with it because he really liked the idea of me sort of following in his footsteps.
Yeah.
But like my now husband, who is my boyfriend at the time, had been asking me these questions like, well, why do you want to do this? And what about this? So like he saw it coming a million miles away. And I think once I got into it and people could see how much joy and passion I had for this subject, it was a natural fit. And I think everyone really came around. And once I made the mental leap to make that choice. Like I was 100% committed because it just made so much more sense and checked all the boxes. And I had been so stubborn for so long that I was really resisting that. So everyone eventually came around. It took a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So our next question actually comes from an educator in Maryland who's curious about, when you're a historian, how do you decide what you're going to lecture about or what your next piece of research is going to be about? Or maybe you can share how you decided on the book that you decided on.
Absolutely. So the book was just an unbelievable moment of good fortune and luck. I was looking for material to read about the cabinet and Washington's administration, to sort of just start my general knowledge gathering as I was trying to figure out what the subject of my dissertation and then my book was going to be. And I couldn't find a book on the cabinet. There's a lot on Jefferson, there's a lot on Hamilton, there's a lot on Washington and their relationships, but there wasn't anything that came at the administration from like a government or an institutional perspective. And so when I realized that there was nothing there, I was like, wow, that's a story I really need to tell. Now, most people don't get that lucky, and most people, with most things, there's not like this, moment of like aha, where the light just kind of shines and you're like, this is what I'm going to do. But I was very fortunate in that instance that it came up, and I had the good luck to be able to tell a story that hadn't been told in over 100 years. So that's really great. For my other work, sometimes it's as simple as, we have an event coming up with work or some sort of anniversary, and they would like me to prepare something, whether it be an article or a talk. And so that's sort of need driven or event driven. Sometimes it's a question, like someone will ask a question and they want me to talk about that or write about that. So sometimes it comes from the audience. And then other times when it's, especially with my own research, usually it's, I have a question about something. So for my book, it was, where did the cabinet come from? And I'm just following that question. And it tends to lead you down a bunch of different rabbit holes, lots of different weird places, and you can find lots of great things. And that's one of my favorite things about being a historian, is that you get to be really curious and follow that curiosity. And that's basically your job.
Nice. I love that. So kind of in a similar vein with writing and trying to figure out what to write about, we had a student who asked, do you ever struggle with writer's block and how do you get over it?
Yes, everyone struggles with writer's block. I think that it looks different for some people than others. So some people really have trouble with certain types of writing, and that gets in their way. Some people really struggle just getting started. Some people really struggle with, they get to a section, and that section is really hard to write. And so for me, it's usually, I hate introductions. I find them to be the hardest. That's where I tend to struggle. Sometimes there have been instances in the past where there's one thing in particular I really just don't want to write, and I just don't want to do it, but I have to. And that's where I struggled with my motivation. So I have a couple of tips. If introductions are your problem, or if getting started is your challenge, I start in the middle. There's nothing that says you have to start with the first paragraph, or even the first sentence in a paragraph. So sometimes I refer to it as like giving myself a running start. I'll be like making my outline, and I'll be like, oh, I really don't want to do this paragraph. And so I'll be like, okay, it needs to be something like, James Monroe was going to go do this thing, and he was wearing this, and these were the people he was going to go see. And by the time you've gotten a couple words in, you're writing and you don't even realize it. And then you can go back and just delete the something like. So sometimes you just need to trick yourself into getting words on the paper, and then all of a sudden it flows. If you really don't like a particular assignment or something you have to write, and you're just kind of forced to do it anyway, which everyone goes through that, I am all about giving yourself motivation and rewards for making progress. So whether that's you write a paragraph and you get to go have some jelly beans, or you write a paragraph and you get to go for a walk with your dog, or you write a paragraph and you get to go listen to a podcast, whatever it is, I'm all about breaking writing down into really small increments and recognizing that each completion is a success, and that will make the process much more fun.
Yeah, I love that idea. So could you share with us something that you really love about history? So like a historical moment that's important to you, maybe something funny, surprising, meaningful in whatever way.
So this is sort of timely because in August 2020, it will be the 100th year anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. And I think that sometimes today, because women have had the right for a very long time, we sort of dismiss that as insignificant, or, it's just voting. But what it actually is, it is a codification. It is enshrining in the Constitution and the highest law of the land that women have these legal rights. And that led to a lot of other things. So, for example, my grandmother went to Cornell. She got her degree from Cornell, and she entered into Cornell in 1947. And she was one of the first classes that allowed women, and sort of started a tradition in my family of supporting women's education and the importance of getting your degree. And I don't think that kind of thing would happen if women didn't have the right to vote and to participate in defining what culture and policy was going to be. So it's one really big sort of national moment, and then one small moment for me and my family personally.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's so hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that like 100 years feels like a long time, but it's not.
No. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's really cool. So obviously, when it comes to history, DreamWakers is based here in DC, and I know White House Historical Associations here in DC. There's history all around us. We're surrounded by it constantly. And obviously other students are too, but for those who aren't based in like a traditionally historical city, what are some suggestions for things that they could do to learn more either about our nation's capital or just history more generally?
Well, it's such a good time to sort of be alive if that's what you're interested in, because there's so much incredible information and so many incredible resources available online. And in so many different mediums too. So like, for example, podcasts, there are tons of great history podcasts. One of my favorites in particular is Ben Franklin's World, and that looks at early American history. And so that's an incredible resource that brings on scholars to talk about their work, but it's really accessible. And so I always recommend that. So that's great because that's something you can also do while, chores or cleaning or cooking or walking or whatever you want to do.
Mhm.
And then in terms of online resources, of course, all of the great museums, historic sites like Mount Vernon, they have incredible online materials as well. You can go and do 3D tours of their sites. So even if you can't come visit or, it's closed right now because of the global pandemic, but you can still go see the site, which I think is such a helpful part of understanding the historic experience.
Mhm.
And then the last thing I would say is if you're really interested, there are a ton of archival materials available online. And one of my favorites in particular is Founders Online. It's run by the National Archives, and it is a collection of all of the digitized papers. And so the when I say digitized, it's not just like scans of their handwriting. It's actually the published volumes that have been digitized of Washington, Franklin, Madison, Jefferson, Hamilton. Who else am I missing? Adams. And so if you're interested in any of those presidents or in any of those time periods, because their letters actually speak to so many different issues. So you can research slavery, you can research gender, you can research class, you can research diplomacy through these letters and actually dig into the materials and, be a historian yourself.
Very cool. I love that. So another question comes from a student in Louisiana, a high schooler, who's asking, what skills that did you develop that you think were instrumental in helping you thrive in your career?
So there are two. One is, and I'm sorry, I know this is very annoying, but you have to work on your writing. I honestly don't feel like I really got a grasp on how to write well until like 2 years ago. And I had been in school for a million trillion years. So it is a lifelong battle, is a lifelong process of continuing to improve. But once you get to a certain point and you kind of view it as a game, I actually think it becomes fun to, think, how can I make this sentence better? So never give up, never stop working on your writing. The other one that I would say is I did a lot of debate and mock trial in both high school and in college. So any form of public speaking activity that you can do, whether it's theater or debate or model UN, I don't care what it is, but public speaking is such a huge part of the 21st century world, whether it's engaging with clients, engaging with donors, if you're in sales or business or trade or history. As historians, we want to share material with people, and you can't do that if you're afraid to talk to them. So I think that is a really undervalued part of the job and one that people could focus on, and doing it young just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication skills. I think we hear that from a lot of our speakers, just being able
Definitely.
to write and verbally communicate well. It's so important. So if you could go back and talk to a younger you, so say maybe you were this high schooler, do you have any
Mhm.
advice that you would impart now that you know what you know?
This is sort of like the opposite of what I just said, which is that I'm so glad I did my trial and all of these activities, but I took them so seriously. And I felt like if I lost a competition, it was life or death. And I was so emotionally invested. That's kind of just my personality. I tend to get very invested in whatever it is that I'm doing. And that was good because I learned and I improved and I was committed. But I think it would be helpful to remember when you're thinking about something, like, will this matter in 5 years? Will I still be upset about this in 5 years? And I promise today, I do not care whether I won or I lost an activity. I do not care if I didn't get the role that I wanted. I do not care if, someone was mean during cross examination. And so definitely do the activities, get what you can out of them in terms of skills. But I promise it's not life or death. And I wish that I had been able to kind of shake that into myself back then.
Don't forget to have fun too.
Exactly. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a good activity.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're running low on time, so we've finally come to our last question, which is just to kind of look back on this conversation. And are there one or two things that you hope that students take from this, or that we all take from this conversation today?
I think there are two things. One, if you have passion for something and if you have joy when you are doing that activity, that's a great thing, and find a way to try and, pursue that in some way. So you don't have to pick a career that's really hard and you hate doing. You can pick something you love and then find a way to bring that joy into your activity. The second thing I would say is there is no one way to be a historian or to be a teacher or to be a lawyer or to be an artist or a writer or whatever it is you want to do. And especially in the 21st century where there's so much technology and the world is increasingly changing and going online, I think we're going to see the world go through a huge sort of revolution in the next couple of years. Be creative about what it is you want to do. Take your joy and your passion and the sort of subject matter, and then follow your own path. You don't have to follow anyone else's.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
Your time today and just answering our students' questions and talking with us all about your career journey.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. As always, you can find these conversations here on our Facebook page. They're also on YouTube after the fact. And this week, we're focusing on White House history. So tune in tomorrow and Thursday for more conversations about White House history. Thanks again, Lindsay, and we'll see you all hopefully later this week.